Good morning or good evening, depending on your time zone. I'm actually pretty impressed with this background. I'm sitting on the floor, nice and cozy, nice and comfy, and we're going to do a September Wrapped. I was kind of worried because I only really got back into reading in September, so I didn't really know if I would have a lot of books to go over, but I did 3 physical books and 3 audiobooks. And one of the audiobooks, I ended up ordering the physical copy, so I do have that so I can hold it up and go over that, which is really exciting for some reason. But we are going to start with the audiobooks. I'm just going to tell you what I rated them and a brief summary of the plot. So, the first one, I did A Murder to Remember. I'm hoping I can put a little picture of it right here, but if not, I just look like I'm gesturing to nothing. I have A Murder to Remember by Kelly Bryn. I did not finish this. It was not very long, but the premise of it was that it's two people who have like a little hookup and then they get like amnesia somehow and they don't remember what happened, but they know that someone sketchy came in the house. I feel like I was the one with amnesia, is what I put on my Goodreads, and I didn't understand it. And like, this is the only book or audiobook that I haven't finished, which is very surprising because I don't know, it wasn't that long, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't pay attention. I could not focus on it. So I DNF'd that one. And then I have The Accidental Dating Experiment, and that was by, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm reading that backwards. A Murder to Remember is by Bryn Kelly, not Kelly Bryn. The Accidental Dating Experiment is by Lauren Blakely. I really like that one. I found it very easy to listen to. I didn't really have any qualms with it, honestly. It was quite quick as well, and just the pacing, and I do listen to them on like 1.75, 1.85, depending on how the cadence of the narrators is. But I said, this was good, it's predictable, it's a short term listen, and it's just the character dynamic is fun, and the premise was just fun. Basically, it's these two podcasters, and they kind of cover the romance and dating and breakups and stuff. And he's a bit more cynical, and she's just like open to it. One of their listeners gives them a house because they helped her find love, and they're like, oh my god, so they go to check it out. Basically, the woman of the podcasters wants to start a segment about like dating more people. And then he's like kind of jealous about that. And he's like, how about you date me instead and I'll pretend to be different people, kind of. And that's just like the setup. And it's like, it was just easy. It was just something I enjoyed listening to. The narration was kind of fun. Like, I found that chemistry also not too bad. And then I listened to The Stranger Beside Me. And I have listened to this before, so I already had it on Audible. It is quite long. It's between like 16 and 18 hours, I want to say. But I really, really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars, and I don't really like autobiographies or biographies of any kind, but just the way that it's done is so clever. If you don't know it, it's a story of Ted Bundy, and it's written by Anne Rule, who actually is someone that Ted Bundy used to work with when he was in a like crisis hotline center. And it's kind of like she's a crime writer, and then obviously he's a serial killer, and it ends up being like it's kind of the unfolding of the story, and it is just done so beautifully. And like some points you're kind of like, wow, that's a lot of information, but I think like just with the sheer amount of information from the case, it's condensed very nicely. And I think it's just such an interesting perspective, and it is very respectful of the victims, in my opinion. Well, I ordered that. It's one of those little books, but it has quite a large page count. But I also do think that's because the book is so tiny, and there's some like, make sure this is appropriate. There are some like pictures inside the book as well. So I'm glad I got this, and I just love it. I think it is done so well. And then I have The Thursday Murder Club. I have the first book by Richard Osman, and I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars, just because I found it a little bit confusing at some points because it is a series. I have 2, 3, and 4, and he's making number 5 for next year. And there's also a movie coming out next year about the first one, at least. So I'm really excited about that. I really like this book. I find the characters very likable, and they all are pretty well developed as well. It is about a group of, I believe it's 4, yes, 4 older people, 2 men, 2 women, and they live in a retirement village and they solve murders, basically. And I think that's all I can really say without giving it too much away. I will do like a comprehensive series kind of summary whenever I finish all of them, but I really, really liked it. I think if you are going into this book, have the expectation that you're kind of treated as an investigator yourself. And there are some characters introduced where you're like, wow, this is a lot of characters. Because the first like 30, 40 pages are a little bit overwhelming just because there are so many characters, but it's still done like really well. And once you kind of get to know them, you're like, wow, I really like all these people. And I have read the second one, and I'm really excited to read the third and the fourth. So I give this one 4 stars. Probably be like a 4.5 if it wasn't as confusing with all the characters. But now that I'm like on book two, book three, book four, and I understand his writing style more, I think like those will be a little bit higher ratings. I also think it's really cool to have books with older people as the focal point, just because I don't really feel like they're as represented. So it's done really nicely too. And then I have The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston, 5 out of 5 stars. I love this book. This is like one of my favorite books of all time. I don't annotate books like that. And I had so many annotations and like, what is it, dog folds on the pages. And I literally started a little quote book from the amount of quotes that I loved. This book is the definition of invisible string theory. It is unbelievable. The way that it is all wrapped up and tied together, absolutely insane. I recommend this book to every single person. And it is a romance, but it's like a magical realism element as well. The female character, her name is Clementine, and she's a publisher, and she is left an apartment in her aunt's will, and it is an apartment that can send you either 7 years in the past or 7 years in the future. And it is a romance, and it is just so beautiful. And I read this at the gym on the bike, and I was like out there like swinging my legs and like messing up my gym and stuff. And I brought this to work, and I was reading it on my breaks, and like people come up and talk to me, and I'd be like, let me tell you about this book. I could not get enough of this book. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And I actually got another book from Ashley Poston. I'm hoping it gives me the same feeling because this is unbelievable. I would recommend it to every single person. And it is just so clever the way that it was written. And something like 200 pages in, I realized there was a reference in chapter one that was completely relevant. And it's one of those things where like if you watch a movie twice, you'll get a whole new like understanding and meaning. As I was going through the book, I was really like realizing, oh, that thing that happened earlier, now it's coming up again. And it's just brilliantly written. And I have nothing bad to say about this book, nothing bad at all. I found myself both wanting to only ever read this and not do anything else in my life, or not wanting to read it at all because I knew that it would end and I would leave the universe of these characters. So I have nothing but good things to say. Absolutely obsessed. And that is an interesting comparison to this book because I did not like this book. I gave this one a 2 out of 5, and that's being pretty generous. I've tried to film how I feel about this book multiple times. I was going to do a whole separate review just because I have a lot to say about it, but I think it's one of those things, if you're interested in it, then read it for yourself, see how you feel. But I also would never recommend that you do that because I don't really think that people should subject themselves to that necessarily. This book is about 600 pages. I think it's 606. It is Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton, and it is a duology. There's Hunting Adeline that's behind this as well, and I will not be reading that. I've heard that one's even darker than this one, and this is a dark romance. Basically, the main character, Adeline, she goes by Addie in the book. She moves into a family heirloom kind of house, and she simultaneously tries to solve a mystery that involves her great grandmother. At the same time, she's being stalked, and it's a stalker romance. There are a lot of trigger warnings, like a lot of trigger warnings, but they're all very, very real. And if anything, I think there should be more. There were two good things in this book for me. I liked the best friend character. I found her very reliable. Anytime Addie needed something, she was right there, and she was just fantastic and kind of like a badass. She didn't really have a ton of personality aside from being like a good friend, but I think that was something that was like nice to read and like a fun dynamic for the story as well. And I did like the subplot of the story with Addie trying to solve the mystery with her great grandmother more than I liked the actual main romance. There was like an element of magical realism of ghosts, because I guess like it's called Haunting Adeline, and like the manor that she lives is supposed to be very creepy and like ghosty and stuff. But I think that was completely unnecessary, to be honest with you, because it mentioned a couple times like, and there were hairs in the back of my neck and stuff like that. But I think it was a completely unnecessary storyline to add in any kind of magical realism, and I didn't like that. And I usually love magical realism. I mean, 7 Year Slip is practically all magical realism. Once the male character becomes more prevalent in the story, it just goes downhill for me, honestly. It's very, very graphic in the way that he kills people as well. And then it's very, very graphic what he does to her when she like clearly doesn't want it. And this isn't a spoiler at all. It's very obvious if you read the back of the book. The smut became the story instead of the story. The subplot was more interesting. And I also found the smut to be quite repetitive, to be honest. I found that there were 17 different ways of saying how turned on she was. And at a certain point, I was like, I don't really care anymore. There is not enough of a story to keep me interested in this. It is clearly just about them hooking up. And that wasn't something I really liked to read. That is everything that I read in September. And I'm really excited to show you what I read in October as well. Now let's take a thumbnail. Okay, that was it. Thank you for watching. See you next time.